Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. And we'll start off with the acknowledgement of the traditional lands.
The land upon which we work, live, and sustain ourselves is the ancestral and treaty lands of the Michizagig Anishinaabe, also known today as the Mississaugas of the Credit, the rightful caretakers and title holders of this land. We also recognize the rich pre-contact history and relationships which include the Anishinaabe and the Ongwe Hongwe.
Since European contact, this land continues to be home to Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples. As responsible community members, we value the diversity, dignity, and worth of all people.
Colonialism displaced and dispossessed Indigenous peoples of their ancestral land
and continues to deny their basic human rights, dignities, and freedoms.
We are committed to learning true history to reconcile, make reparations, and fulfill our treaty obligations to the original peoples and our collective responsibilities to the land, water, animals, and each other for future generations.
Great, thank you. We have the agenda in front of us. I'd like to have someone put it on the floor. Trustee Alls, and also seconded by Trustee Bailey. Do we have any comments before we have approval of the agenda? Do I have approval of the agenda? All those in approve? Sorry?
Question. I didn't see the, and forgive me if this is out of order, maybe if I missed it, the exams. Is this supposed to come? No? Okay. That's my understanding. We're good.
Do I have approval? All those in favor? Okay, we have approval of the agenda. Okay, so we'll move on to declaration of conflict of interest. Do we have anyone who has a conflict of interest? Seeing none, I will move on to approval of the minutes. So first, I'd like to have it put on the floor. Can I have someone put it on the floor for me? I got Trustee Benjamin and seconded by Trustee Bailey. I believe I have a comment. Yes.
Yep, thank you so much, Chair. I just wanted to note that I was present at the meeting last time. I don't sit on this committee, but I was in attendance and I wasn't included in the minutes. So
okay.
There we go. Thank you.
Thank you. We can make that correction. Okay, all those in favor of that amended agenda? Okay, approved. Okay, next item is delegations. Sorry. Oh, sorry, my comment. Sorry, on to the next item, which is delegations. We have no delegations tonight, so we'll move on to staff reports. So we have a staff report, the repeal of policy 3 for us today. And who will be talking about? So our governance counselor will be talking to the repeal of policy 3.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair. As you know, we are embarking on our policy management program. You will hear more about that later this evening, but in the meantime, as we review all of our policies, we're noting things to be brought forward to this committee, and this is one such policy. Directive 2 of the Ministry Directive stated that members of the board shall immediately cease to participate on hiring, promotion, and appointment panels, including temporary or acting positions, except for the position of Director of Education. So in response to that directive, in 2020, Policy 87, Board of Trustee Participation on Hiring, Appointments, and Promotion Panels, was approved, which restricts members of the board from participating on hiring, promotion, and appointment panels for any positions other than the Director of Education. However, Policy 3 directed that a minimum of 1 member of the Board of Trustees serve as part of the interview panel for the appointment of principals and vice principals, and that 4 trustees form part of a committee that carries out interviews for the appointment of senior supervisory staff. This means Policy 3 was inconsistent with the new Policy 87 that was passed, as well as Directive 2. So this report before you today is to recommend the repeal of Policy 3. So we're left with Policy 87, which was previously approved in compliance with Directive 2. happy to answer any questions.
Do we have, hearing this, does someone want to put this on the floor? Okay, trustee Fellows, do I have a seconder? Okay, trustee Clark. So, do we have any questions or comments about this?
One question.
Yes, trustee, turn your mic on, please.
When was policy 2 completed? I mean, policy 3 completed?
Through you, Mr. Chair, policy 3 was first approved in, it appears, 1969, was last revised in 2019. So prior to the directives.
Thank you.
No other questions?
Oh,
Uh,
I
so-
do have one.
Sorry?
One more.
For you, trustee Bell?
Through you, Chair. So if this policy is repealed, does anything replace it? And then how does these positions become full? Is there a policy?
Policy 87 is through you, Mr. Chair. Policy 87 was passed in compliance with Directive 2 that set out that trustees were not to be involved with the hiring. So the hiring is done administratively through the Director of Education as delegated by the Director of Education, and that's consistent with the Education Act.
Anyone else have a comment? So I have a comment following it in trustee Bailey's line. This policy talks about the hiring, and yes, there is trustees involved in it, but you know, it talks about the superintendent hiring, it talks about the director hiring, and then the appointment of principals, and that's where I see the trustee item in there. And then assignment of principals, established schools, and et cetera, travel allowances and stuff. So I'm wondering how we can rescind this policy when we're, I'll use the expression, throwing the baby out with the bathwater. Can't we just redline out the trustee components and keep the policies so that, you know, it talks about, you know, the hiring process, especially for a director, it's selected by the trustees. You know, then it talks about superintendents, there's academic requirements, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Thank you for the question, and through you, Mr. Chair. The provisions for hiring are set out in the Education Act for supervisory officers, for principals, vice principals, and there are procedures which are, in connection with this, have been reviewed and are in the process of being updated through the procedure process, because they are procedures under the Education Act as opposed to a policy. So they are set out, and there is direction provided to staff through those procedures.
So Mike, you know, one of my items that I look at here, item A, whatever, it's 1A, academic qualifications, length of successful professional experience related fields outside of the region B, and breadth of experience. The policy, this policy in a sense would allow trustees to have the ability to set some of those numbers, right, if they wanted to. But if we take this policy away, we no longer, you know, let's say I want, before a teacher can become a vice principal, you know, you have to have a minimum of X, Z, you know, years of teaching experience. Now, are you saying that is in the procedure, or should it be in a policy? It's not directly mentioned, but it is indirectly talked about in this policy. And again, removing that, does that, you know, kind of take away some of those oversight things?
Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you for the question. There isn't a trustee oversight through a policy. You are correct with the procedures. The procedures are based on the legislation, and through the procedures were developed in concert with the ministry, PPMs, and directives on hiring principals, vice principals, et cetera. So they are consistent with ministry guidelines. They're consistent with BEEP, they're consistent with the SEEP, and you're right, there's not a trustee oversight with the removal of this policy.
And so there's no minimum years of teaching experience or minimum years of principals experience before you go into superintendent. There's none of that in the PPMs or government procedures. They talk about a procedure and how to hire someone, but it doesn't say, hey, these are the qualifications that, minimums that we are looking for. Can you mute? Okay.
Thank you, that is, through you, that is correct.
Okay.
That is correct.
Okay, I appreciate that. I appreciate the answers and response. So do we have any other comments or questions? Yes, Trustee Ellis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you, that was a great question. I'm just thinking, in the removal of this policy, is there room for us to create a policy that would allow for some kind of, I don't know if oversight is the right word, but perhaps to include some of the metrics that the chairman was mentioning that are missing?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I'm not sure I quite follow the question. Is it that you would like this policy not repealed and to bring back further report? Or is it that we'll repeal this and then bring forward a further report about trustee involvement in hiring?
I think the latter, through you, Chair.
Yeah, and I don't mean to put words in my, I don't think we're talking about hiring. We're not hiring, that we're off that list. Directors are very clear, which I missed. But I think it's just maybe setting some standards, I guess. Is that what you're trying to say?
Through you, Chair, thank you. To clarify, that's exactly it. As we repeal this, and this becomes repealed, could we look, would it be possible or within the realm of possibility to consider a policy that would institute some standards and guidelines?
Through you, Mr. Chair. So I would take that would be a motion to repeal and to report back on standards for guidance for hiring as opposed to hiring.
Yes, I was hoping for a yes, and then that would have been my next follow-up, but we took the yes and went straight through. So through you, Chairman, thank you. Yes, I think that is what I would like to ask for. Yeah.
Okay, so you're putting a motion on the floor then, so you need a seconder?
Yes.
You need a seconder, I have Trustee Clark. So we're now have a motion on is to repeal this, and this is called amendment, I guess. The motion is to repeal it, but also then request a report on looking at, some supervision guidance on the hiring. And to make it specific, according to this, it's only senior, supervisory staff, principals and vice principals. Okay, so does everyone understand the motion? Does anyone want to talk to the motion? Trustee Davies?
It just seems like we're trying to get around some rules that have been clearly set down by the ministry, not to get involved in this, and yet we're trying to institute a policy which gets us involved in it. I just think that we're going to get slapped down, and there's a reason why the ministry said, I want you guys to have zero involvement in the hiring process. So I would say let's stay out of it.
Thank you. Any other comments before we vote on this? Trustee Bailey, do you have a comment?
Yeah. As trustee, our role is to provide governance and set policies. If we're not going to be doing the actual hiring, I'm just clarifying, we're setting guidelines for how they hire. That's all we're doing with this.
Correct.
Okay, wait a second. Okay, so we talk through the chair. We don't argue, talk between each other. Okay. So Trustee Davies?
Yeah, through the chair, I think the ministry's directive was clear for us not to be involved in the hiring process. And I just see this as we are trying to get involved in the hiring process.
So on the motion on the floor is not to get involved, just ask for a report, I believe, right? Yeah. So at that point in time, when the report comes on, we can make that decision on our involvement in correction to the directives, our relation to the directives. Okay, do we have any other comments? Yeah, Trustee Cremona?
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick question. With repealing this, does this put us more in line with what other school boards across Ontario are doing? Is this consistent with how things are being done now according to the changes from Queen's Park?
Yes, yes.
Thank you for the question through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, it does. It brings us more in line with what others are doing, and it brings us in line with what the ministry directors required us to do.
Yeah, and just to add some history, like we were one of the few boards that were involved physically in the interview process of the hiring of the senior team. Anyway, I have another question online. I see the hand shaking. Trustee McDonald?
Yeah, thank you, through you, Chair. I just wanted some extra clarity on what the motion is, because I was supporting what Trustee Davies said, because, but you said it's just a report, because I think in our roles, we're not to get involved in, like, say, the writing of the policies or operationalizing things. So I just want clarity as to what the motion is about. I'm still a little confused.
For you, governance.
Thank you for the question, and through you, Mr. Chair. What I have recorded for the motion is to repeal existing policy 3 and to report back on standards for hiring as a guideline. So it'll be staff reporting.
So it's a report back on the standard.
Yes.
Okay. And I just wanted to say, like, for historical context, the reason that trustees got, because usually trustees don't sit on hiring panels, but we had a human rights case about, and it was actually the human rights, I'm not sure if it's tribunal or commissioner, actually part of the settlement of the dispute was that we are to sit on hiring panels, because it was felt that there was discrimination against racialized people in the hiring process. So that's how trustees got involved initially. It was actually a part of a settlement with the board. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee McDonald. So with all the discussion complete, do I have approval of this motion that we discussed? Okay, and do I have any objections to it? So the motion carries. So our next item, we go to our 7.2 naming and renaming of schools, special function areas, and facility policy update number 4. So I'll hand that over to you, our governance council.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I will turn the report over to Donna Ford, Superintendent of Education, who has presented to this committee before on this topic and is here with the updated report. Thank you.
Thank you and good night, and through you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to recommend approval for Policy 27, naming and renaming of schools, special function areas, and facilities. Referencing the feedback from this committee, a revised version of Policy 27, naming and renaming of schools, special function areas, and facilities is presented to the committee. In the highlight of changes, Policy 27 provides clarity and is responsive to the issues and items raised by committee members at the January 2023 meet in these areas in particular. Members of the committee expressed a preference that schools are not named after people. The policy now affirms what falls into the yes examples of names through sections 5.7 and 5.8. Questions about what activates a name change are addressed in the policy at section 5.2. And there's greater clarity on how Policy 27 guides engagement in the name change request of submissions. And there are now 2 possible pathways. One where submissions regarding schools, school name changes, or facility name changes once given the go-ahead by the director, are supervised by the associate director, or when the submission of name changes with respect to school program areas occurs, once given the go-ahead by the director, is supervised by the superintendent of education. And finally, the Peel District School Board commitment to community engagement, in keeping with community engagement policy, which I believe is currently in the development stage, is secured via access to stakeholder access to the request form and stakeholder engagement in the naming committee itself. Happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you, Superintendent Ford. Have I put this on the floor? I don't think so. So can I have someone, Trustee Elves, will put it on the floor. Do I have a seconder? Trustee Benjamin? So do we have any comments, questions? Okay, put your mic on, please, Trustee Bailey.
So, first of all, through you, Chair,
Yeah, thank you.
can you just clarify for me first, the difference between when it says shall and may?
That's a good question. Yeah,
Thank you for the question, and through you, Mr. Chair. Shall is a directive and may is a possible.
Sorry, you continue on.
Yes. One more. So in 5.4 of the facilities, it says, the Associate Director of School Improvement, Equity Curriculum and Instruction and Student Community Engagement, or the designate alongside the appropriate site lead and Superintendent of Education, where applicable, will assess the submission. But it doesn't say within what timeline. Is that outlined somewhere else?
Through you, Chair, thank you for the question. From my review, I would agree there doesn't seem to be a timeline that's identified, and certainly that's something that can be written into the policy, so we take note of that.
Yes, please.
Thank you for allowing me to interject. Would it be satisfactory, as opposed to saying a particular time frame, such as 30 days or something, say a reasonable time frame? Because there's issues such as, what if it's raised during the summer? What if it's raised during prior to a March break kind of situation? So I think that given workloads, et cetera, that I think putting in a hard number may be a challenge. But if we could say add into that section within a reasonable time period.
But what's reasonable to you and what's reasonable to who?
And that is often, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair, if I may, reasonable is a word that is used often in trying to encapsulate, and the reasonableness is based on two standards, actually. One is, what is a reasonable period of time by an ordinary citizen? So that is a legal that's a legal tenet. It is what is reasonable by what a common understanding would be. The second factor that influences the word reasonable is what are reasonable in the circumstances. So if an application came and it was a year, that clearly would not be reasonable by any kind of standard. But to say that it must be done immediately, within a week, that also is not reasonable, because that's reprioritizing other work that may have to be done, as well as putting unrealistic expectations on one particular aspect of the function of this group. So I think reasonable is a standard that has been tested in the past and could be used. There could always be a challenge to the application of a particular circumstance if it's felt that it has been unreasonable. So the applicant could say, it is unreasonable that I have not been responded to in 10 months or a year.
Can I ask, you said March break through each other.
Okay.
Doesn't the associate director work in the summer and during break? Isn't the offices open?
Yes, they are 12-month employees, that is correct. They are entitled to vacation.
They are entitled to vacation, but that's without, and can come anytime, right?
That is correct.
My concern here is the definition of reasonable is still very vague, very loose, right? If you say reasonable and not to exceed a certain timeline, then at least whoever it is that's waiting on the information has a expectation of time.
Can I just suggest one way of getting reasonable and the too short time is just say no later than 6
That's what I'm
months?
asking.
Would that be something that's, amenable?
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to respond. Yes, that's fine with me. I would turn to Superintendent Ford to see if that's a reasonable time frame from her perspective, being the person that's going to be owning this policy. The purpose of my question was to make sure that we had something concrete to put in this, because what we were hoping for is the motion that this would be recommended for approval with that change, so that it wouldn't have to come back yet another month, and we could actually move this along tonight. So that was the purpose of my pushing a little bit on that time limit. So I would turn it over to Superintendent Ford, with your permission, Mr. Chair, to comment on the, but not less than 6 months.
I think that's manageable. I do want to remark with respect to the availability of staff. If you look at section 6.11, the naming committee is diverse, so that there are staff that are, not available during times when school is not in session. And part of the tenet of the policy is to make sure that there is as much community engagement as possible. And I don't think that there would be any harm or interference in using that limit or that bracket. I think that would be supportive.
Just to understand, the 5.4, which Trustee Bailey is talking about the name change, right? So it's a renaming process. And so is that's just approving the consideration that I want a name change, and it goes through your team, and you say, no, we're not going to consider it. It's not about the process. Oh, yes, we've agreed now that we're going to rename this school, and that's another process too.
That is
So, you're right, so there's two different processes, I
Yes,
see.
it's staged, that's correct.
Okay, so how does that relate to Trustee Bailey's comments then? She's talking about 5.4, but you're also talking about 6.1 when you're in the process of changing, and is that a different timeline too, or do we need to add a timeline to that? Or is that a year-long process? Because that's where you want to do community consultation. It's 5.4 is just we'll call it an internal group of appeal. While when we go outside and we say we've decided to rename, the director has made the statement, let's start the process. And anyway, sorry, I'm not trying to put words in your mouth, but I just want your comment, Superintendent Ford.
Yeah. So 5.4 describes that when requests come through stakeholders, through the schools, and are brought to the attention of the superintendent of equity and the associate director, I think that it would be possible, let's say there are, X number of submissions, that in a timely way, decisions will be made in terms of which submissions go forward, because those submissions need to be considered based on the criteria that are outlined in the policy.
Please.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. I think that timely is probably going to have the same comments as reasonable. So I think that the question is within 6 months or not to exceed 6 months, an acceptable addition to paragraph 5.4, which is really kicking off the process, that initial assessment.
Yeah, my apologies. I thought I'd already said that makes sense. Yeah, I think so too.
So,
So we'll park that as an amendment, we're gonna be amending this policy, so we're gonna collect all the changes, is that how the appropriate thing is being done? And then we'll vote on each change separately, is that the best thing, or should we vote on all together?
separately, so that way we're ensuring what we're voting on.
Right, yeah, okay, so we'll just keep that, we'll park that, and then we'll go through the process of, so we'll go now, if that's your, to add to that paragraph 5.4, we're gonna say, that we're gonna, what's the word we're gonna, how we're gonna say that, it's gonna be, to be completed within 6 months. Okay, so you're putting on the floor, do you have a second? Okay, trustee Ellis has it. We're not going to vote on it. We're just going to leave that now and go through any other potential comments or questions around the policy. I think I had trustee Benjamin is next, and we'll come back to you, trustee Clark. Yes, trustee.
Mr. Chair, I'm on the phone and I'm driving and I have a comment or a question.
Can we just wait, trustee Benjamin, and then I'll come to you after trustee Clark, Chair Dave. Chair Gray.
Through you, Chair, my only comment is we had, I think, in the last term, a name change requested for a particular school, and the community was involved. So I just wanted to know, like, when the community was involved, how long did it take? Was it done within 6 months, or did it go beyond? So when you say 6 months, it means you're giving a definite time period. Like, suppose if other stakeholders are involved, if it goes beyond that, what will happen? So
right, and I think part of the conversation is that we have to separate two things. This is 5.4, is only when someone submits into the process, I'd like a name change, right? That is going to be, that to say, yes, we'll start, this is a good idea, we're going to change the name, but we'll make that decision within 6 months. Then that triggers the next process, which Superintendent Ford was talking about, that will then start all the consultation, and that doesn't happen overnight, and I don't know if a timeline on that is, I'll let you make the decision on that, but that right now doesn't. Okay, do I have any other comments? Okay, trustee Clark, and then we'll come to you, trustee Green.
Okay, so I have two questions, clarifications to you, Chair. Of 5.9, proposed schools, special function areas, names shall not include, in A, it says names of individuals, current PDSB employees, or board members. Now, does that mean individuals, like any individual?
Thank you for the question, through you, Chair. I believe it does, and it was a matter of, I think, useful discussion by the committee in January. Yes.
Okay, because then from C and D, it repeats persons, like the individuals.
That's correct. So names shall not include individuals who are known to be.
Yeah, that's. I'm just I'm not criticizing. I'm just wondering why individual, it's like the use of individuals is repeated.
I mean, it could be reworded. I would suggest that so noted. I think the suggestion is just to clarify categories of individuals within the policy. But thank you. Okay.
Yeah, no problem, because I do agree with that. So.
I think I have a comment from the governance council.
Thank you for the comment, and through you, Mr. Chair. I think that if we were to put current PDSB employees or board members as B, so we would have name of individuals or names of any individuals, and then some categories, which would include employees, which would include board members, which would include the persons as listed in C and D as classes or categories of individuals. So the name is no individuals, including.
Actually, that's through your chair. I would actually, or at least adding just no individuals as the last one, or just so that it doesn't create this confusion of, because I'm just trying to look at the whole thing through the eyes of somebody who isn't familiar with this type of language. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is we're making a change, and just to clarify, what is the actual change that you are going to be noting so everyone can understand it? Then I'll ask for a seconder to this, and then we'll park it, and we'll come back to that change, and then I talk to, next on the list is Trustee Green, and then I'll come to Trustee Romola. Okay, so, and then Trustee Davies, sorry. Everyone's got their hands up.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, I believe that the motion would be to amend paragraph 5.9 to clarify the class of individuals as well as no names of individuals for clarity purposes.
Yeah.
Okay, so do we have a seconder of that? Trustee Bailey will second that. Okay, so we park that, and now I'll go to you, Trustee Green, on the phone.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just, I read this thing, this policy, and I was a little bit confused because I think the way the policy itself as written is very vague. When I looked at it, and then even the listening to Superintendent Ford talk about the process, and I think one of the things that we have to be mindful of, oftentimes, people who are reading our policy is not everybody that is in the education field and understand stuff. And if we're gonna, be creating policy, I think we should be making sure that the policy clear and precise, so any lay reader can read the policy, understand the policy. And if there's an appendix with a process, even that should be clear, and what that process is, how that process look like, so that when like for instance, we come to a committee like this, we come with clear question to ask. But here we are asked, trustees are asking question, and the process have to be explained to trustee. So I'm just putting that out there, just a comment for future when we're looking at policy and stuff like that, because this is one of the area of a trustee role and responsibility. So we have to make sure that the policies that we're approving is clear and concise, so even the lay reader understand the policies when they read them. Just a comment. I'm not asking for anybody to respond, just so that we can think about future. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Green, and I think that comment goes that every policy does go to create an operational procedure, right? And I can understand. I don't know if our governance council wants to add any comments.
Thank you for the comment, and through you, Mr. Chair. Based on the comments from this committee in the past when this policy was before them, that's exactly what has happened. We've gone back and made it as clear as possible in the policy, and we attached the procedure by way of providing that extra clarity when reading the policy in this particular instance, based on questions at past meetings. So typically procedures are done and approved through internal operationalizing of the policy. They were included in this instance based on some questions that were asked at previous committees.
Thank you so much. Okay, Trustee, it was Trustee Romola. Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Thank you so much, Chair. Just touching back to Jeff's question, I had also thought that 5.9 was somewhat redundant, and I wonder if, in the interest of making this as simple as possible, if the idea is that we're not naming schools after individuals at all, do we need to have sort of further subclassifications, or is it just a clear rule, and that maybe I'm unclear on what the intention is? I thought the idea was that there would not be any schools named after individuals, period, rather than needing to sort of further explain who else we don't want to name schools after. Just in the interest of making sure that there's not sort of room for confusion going forward.
Okay, does someone respond? Okay, our governance council.
Thank you for the question, and through you, Mr. Chair. The adding of no individuals at all was based on comments of the committee at the last meeting. The two paragraph 5.9 C and D were originally added to ensure that if there was going to be an individual, that it would be an individual that would fit within the characteristics as described in C and D. The reason for maintaining that and not deleting them, even though we made the amendment to include the prohibition of any names of individuals, was to show the intentions and to the why of that, to try to provide clarity. But of course, we're in the hands of the committee, and if it's not interpreted as clarity and is interpreted as an opportunity for confusion as opposed to clarity, I suppose they could be taken out. And that would be, we're in the hands of the committee for that direction. Thank you.
Okay, so you want to continue?
No, that's okay, thank you.
Just a comment?
Well, I was curious about whether there was a reason, if there was a reason for maintaining the different categories of people that were not naming things after, instead of just saying no individuals at all. So that was my question about them.
Okay, thank you. I'll now go to, please, complete the.
Thank you. It's just for clarity. Is it now an amendment to Trustee Clark's motion that it's not to reword this, but rather to delete C and D? That's my question. I just want to be sure that we're clear on the what the motion is.
Thank you. And that's why I asked, with that response, what did you want to do, Trustee Promoli? Because, you can either, adjust the motion that we have with Trustee Clark, or you can just keep it there.
I don't think I can do that. Can I? Because I don't sit on the
You're not a
committee.
member. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
But
I appreciate it.
It's appreciated.
Yeah.
But I have to continue down the list. So we're going to go to Trustee Davies. But thank you. Now, perfect. We'll go to Trustee Davies.
Just to follow up on Trustee Promoli's point, it's like, okay, we have a back parking lot. We don't want any trucks in there. But then we're gonna say, okay, but no blue trucks, and no green trucks, and no yellow trucks. So it doesn't, I thought this committee made it very clear, we do not want schools named after individuals. Correct. End of story. Not of, okay, well, if they're a really nice guy and they weren't involved in colonialism, and they weren't involved in this, and they weren't involved in that, we can let them slide in. That's what it sounds like C and D are in this thing. That's all. And just as another quick comment here, it does say that it can be named after streets or towns. Most streets or towns are named after individuals. I just thought I'd throw that out there.
That's good.
So I'm going to throw this back to our governance council on this one, because I think Trustee Davies brought up a very good point.
We're going to start naming after numbers. Just number of schools.
I think animals was a suggestion last meeting.
Thank you. And thank you for the comment, and through you, Mr. Chair. Yes, there were some very creative suggestions for what schools could be named after, including, I believe, the periodic table. So there was lots of suggestions at the last meeting. My response to the naming after streets that included individuals, if the street is an individual, this prohibits any school being named after individuals. So if the street is Main Street, it could be Main Street Public School, but if the street is Fred Street, then it couldn't be named Fred School, because that's the name of an individual.
But could it be named Fred Street School?
It's possible.
Okay, I'm good with that.
Wow, it's just, okay, so now we're going on to, sorry. Yeah, so anyway, I'm going to Trustee Bailey was next.
So I wanted to give clarification on the reason why it's important to have C and D. Even though schools can't be named after a person, it can be named in honor of them. So these two clauses ensures that a school is not named in honor of that.
I don't think that's what it indicates, though.
It doesn't, but
Sorry, okay, we're not.
Sorry, yeah.
we're not-
My apologies, Chair.
Yeah,
so does that mean what you're saying is to clarify the clause to ensure that a school is not named in honor if a person is included, it was involved in the transatlantic slave trade?
what if a street name is,
Again, it would preclude that.
but that would be stopped at an individual A. Right? Yeah, sorry, Norman, sorry.
Thank you. My example, and through you, Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to respond. If it was Fred Street, we wouldn't know what Fred. If it is Sir John A. Macdonald Street, that is an identifiable individual. So I think that the intention of the policy and the intention of the committee is that it's an individual as opposed to a name, as a class of names. So there may be instances in particular areas where a first name may be sufficient, or a last name may be sufficient. But if it's a general name, so I think that the clarification could be an identifiable individual.
And before we make the change, I think A says names of individuals.
Yes.
So I think that's clear. Is that, okay. So, okay, do you have any more? Okay, thank you. Trustee Ellis?
Thank you, Chairman. Through you, Chair. I'm not sure if I would have this support for this, but I do want to say I would go as far as to say like no names. To Trustee Davies' point, Fred Street School was the example I believe was used. I just would say no names. You know, we have plenty of plants, plenty of trees, foods, elements on the periodic table was one that was lightheartedly suggested. And I would go as far as to say no. But we should perhaps identify language that would be even more clear, that would really prevent us from naming a school after anything that could be tied to a person. So first name. So I would I don't know how to word this, but no first name, no last name, no name.
And I don't mean to jump into this conversation, but I think I drove up McLaughlin Street here. Right, and so if the school's on McLaughlin, would have a problem, or we have existing schools, named after people. So I think we have to be careful how we do this. And so, I go into, some comments, Fred Street, or let's use McDonald's or John A. Macdonald. But if it's McDonald's, that's okay. But when we do an individual and say Sir John A. Macdonald, then that is now an identifiable person. So I'm just going to throw that out there. There is a difference, and I think it also causes a lot of concern about how our streets are presently named, and maybe that's going to disqualify a lot of potential things, because a street name is. Where's the school? Oh, it's named after typically a street. So I'm just going to throw that out there as, rather than being random, we'll call it names out of nowhere. And I think the policy is that we want to use the street name first if possible, because mail goes, everything. Your maps go there, everything is that. So I'm just going to throw that out there and let you consider that. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. Through you, Chair, again, thank you for the opportunity. I guess my example is clear in Dundas Street. Plenty of things are named after Dundas Street, and we're all aware of the controversy that comes with that non-identifiable name. While it does point to a person in history, it's also would fall into that category of is it identifiable because it's only got the one last name, Dundas. And I think that the policy illustrates that this is for us to consider moving forward, not that we would retroactively change anything unless there was a particular incident or notice of consideration. So I think I am going to stand on that point where I think I say we should look for an opportunity where we're not naming things after names. And if that happens to coincide with the street, great. I think we still have plenty of, but by the time we get through the scientific annotation for plants, we'll have named every building in the city. So I think we have more than enough.
Okay, any more comments? Yes, Trustee Davies.
I'm not this smart, I just Googled it, but of the 118 elements, 20 of them are named after individuals. I'm just saying, you're really cutting yourself down. You're really cutting yourself down. And plants, usually the guy who discovered it, they name them after themselves. Along with stars, planets, everything like that. I just want to make sure that we're clear on what you guys are doing here.
Okay, and so, and I appreciate your comment.
Excuse me, just, I've been.
Yeah, trustee McDonald,
Thank-
trustee McDonald, online, please, your comment.
Thank you. I want to agree with Trustee Davies again wholeheartedly on that. I have been waving my hand to say that because most things, even scientific names, most of them, well, quite a few of them are named after people. You know, there's so many things. So I think we have to be careful when we say not a person, right? Because, for example, you have people that are named Blue, right? So that you're eliminating the name Blue because that's a person. People are named Blue, right? People are named many things. So we have to be careful when we say not a name. It can't be a name that you think is popular, or if you say no names, you have to be careful because I can name about 5 people named Blue. I know people that have the name Apple, right? There are people named Flower, Sunshine. So we have to be careful when we're saying you're not naming it after an individual, right? Because then if any name comes forward, I guess we'd have to search the globe to see if any human being has that name, because that's what we're saying if you're saying after no individual. Because then you can't say, well, you know, we're naming it Sunshine, but it's not named after Sunshine McDonald, it's named after the sun shining. So we have to be careful, right? And I'm not trying to be funny or in semantics, but I just think we have to leave some wiggle room for some kind of judgment call without saying absolutely no name, because we are probably going to eliminate, you know, almost every name. That's my first comment.
Thank you, trustee McDonald. I appreciate that. And I'm sorry I didn't see you wave your hand. I've been looking for the raise hand feature too, so I'll try my best.
It's not showing up on my screen, but sometimes it says it's somebody lowered it, somebody raised it. So I don't know what's going on with the raised hand function. So it's I've been waving my hand because it's not.
Sorry. Okay.
And I have a second comment though.
Okay.
The also some time ago there was a motion, right? And they were supposed to be, staff were supposed to be looking into renaming of McCrimmon School. And that, I'm not sure if that has, because it was my understanding, I could be wrong, that a family was contacted who the board was considering renaming the school after. So are you now going to go back to that family and saying, we have changed our policy, we're not naming the school after people? Because, but I could be wrong. I don't know where this naming thing has landed for that school. If it was shut down, if it's still ongoing. So I'm just saying, because I think we need to also consider that going forward.
Do we have any more comments?
Yes.
Okay, trustee Alex.
So again, just to be clear on how we got to the point where we're at, I understood that we passed this motion for this report because we all have concerns about schools being named after individuals that perhaps may be favorable today, but could be costly and fall out of favor tomorrow. So to address, the rightful comments that my colleagues have raised today, made great points. Yeah, a lot of scientific names are named after people. And Will made a great point about the periodic table. Those were examples. I think, and I'm quoting a rough number, there are close to 170,000 combinations of adjectives in the world. I don't think we have 170,000 schools that we could possibly have. I think there are, my point that I'm trying to make is that there are other options to name things after that are not tied to people at all. And I just want to say again, I really don't think we should be naming things after anyone because of the cost that it costs our board and our students at the end of the day. Because again, people that are in favor today might fall out of favor tomorrow. And I just think as a best practice, we should be naming our schools in the most neutral way possible. But I don't know where to take this now. So over to you, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, so right now it's names of individuals. which stand corrected through our governance, means that identifiable individuals, meaning first name or last name, are not identifiable individuals, but full names like we have had at school. Sir John A. Macdonald was an identified person, and that would be now not allowed in the policy. So we have a clarification with an amendment by Trustee Clark on the 5.9 about categorizing right now. If you want to put another amendment to change it more to say no, not just individual names, but first or last names, that's up to your right to do that. Yes.
Thank you, Chairman. Through you, Chair, I suppose that the way I would like to word this would be, I would like to propose the amendment to include, if there's any way that a first name or last name could be tied to a possible individual, that we not do that, but rather, as Trustee McDonald mentioned earlier, and she gave the example of Sunshine, that we be very specific that that name is relating to the sun, the star, and not the fictitious person that we're using as an example. That we just specify in the naming that should a first name coincide with a thing, that we are naming the school after said thing and not said person.
Okay, so I'm trying to boil that down to a change and an amendment here. You have to help me.
Yeah, sure.
You have to help. Yes, please.
So, thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Chairman. I would say that, and Trustee McDonald's got her hand up as well. My amendment would be that we specify when naming things after a first name or a would-be last name, what exactly we are naming them after. So in the case of the fictitious name Sunshine, we would associate clearly that this is Sunshine XYZ fictitious school is being named after the star, not the person's name.
So you're not really changing 5.9.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right.
So what you're really talking about, and I'm going to talk to Superintendent Ford on this, you're really talking about, when the name's been picked, should we be putting just some words in that picking or choice of how this name came about, right?
So yes, and I'm just wondering if section 5.7A assists with deselection of names that may be problematic, because it must rest against our commitment to anti-colonialism, anti-racism, anti-oppression, etc.
True.
And I'm also wondering if section 5.8, the question of may, came up, subsection D, where we're looking not to we are looking more to be concerned with recognition of something of historical significance, which tends to give us a sense of latitude and innovation and understanding that which might be brought as a name versus a focus on an individual person.
Okay, and thank you. I think that's very good. So does that meet your objective without having that motion, Trustee?
Yes, I would say, thank you, Chairman, through you, Chair. Yeah, as long as the et cetera allows for that gap where, perhaps that person is just unsavory, but not, maybe they check every other box, but they are, show considerations that are unsavory or opinions that are unfavorable, or if that et cetera covers that, then I would say yes, absolutely, and thank you for providing that clarification.
Okay, and Trustee McDonald online, you're raising your hand during this conversation.
Yeah, well, actually, I was going to respond to Trustee Al's point, but if he says what just transpired was okay, then I don't need to make my comment anymore. Thank you.
I appreciate your input. Thank you. Okay, do we?
Yeah, sorry, I just have.
Okay, so I'm going to Trustee Clark, and then I'll come to you, Trustee Bailey.
Yeah, just a comment through you, Chair. I just want to thank everybody for all the mental gymnastics we just did trying to get this to work, because most of us, you know, what, at least on this side of the table, a lot of us don't really understand the everydayness of systemic discrimination and racism. So it's important, and while yes, it is some duplication, but it's important for people to be reminded, certainly the people who read it and interpret it, why we're doing this. You know, we know we know what has happened. So we can't be cowards and duck our head, you know, put our heads in the sand and pretend that this stuff hasn't been going on under our noses, because not only my indigenous side has had to deal with this, but my white side has also been colonized by this consistent, invisible systemic discrimination. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Trustee Clark. Trustee Dale?
Yes. Through you, Chair.
Thank you.
Question. In 6.11, my question is, it says the members of the naming committee may include. Who's making up that committee? Who's choosing that committee? Because it's saying, as if I'm correct in what you had said earlier, it says possibility, not a shall.
Trustee Ford? Sorry, Superintendent Ford?
Yeah, thanks for the question. And through you, Chair, you know, we want to create as much engagement as possible and cast a wide yet reasonable and matchable net in terms of the consultation. You know, what occurs to me is just availability of members. So this is a list of individuals that we believe would be key. You know, sometimes regional representatives aren't able to sit at every meeting, but we would want to reach out and touch base to make sure that they are aware of and engaged in, you know, a process that, you know, affects the town, right, and affects our relationship with the town, for example.
Right, because it is a long list of people, right?
Exactly, it is a long list, and I appreciate what you're saying. Is it possible to break that down to say shall contain and may also? So there's two parts, the people who have to be on the committee and the parts who can be added?
I'll have our governance council will respond.
Thank you for the question, and through you, Mr. Chair. I think maybe what you're getting at is that they could be offered to be on the committee, but whether they choose to be or not shouldn't be in our hands, but should be in their hands. I think I hear that's what you're saying. So we could reword this to say, shall be provided the opportunity to be on the committee. If they choose not to be, the offer's been made and we can proceed. We just don't want it to be a holdup from proceeding if it's a requirement and then they're choosing not to attend.
Yes, because my concern is with the way it's written right now, it's any of these can be given the opportunity, but if they're not given the opportunity, then it's okay, we're okay with policy.
So what I'm hearing you is we're changing, you would like the words changed. What I'm hearing the response back is that we can say may include, you shall be offered to the following.
Shall be offered to the following.
Yeah, shall be offered to the following. Is that what I'm understanding?
Thank you, and through you, that is an alternative. There's also, this committee is ultimately going to be taking the proposed names to the committee, to the PTSD committee. And so it's always open to that committee, which is another check and balance, and then ultimately to the board itself through the approvals, that if if the committee or if the board feels that no, the committee was not broad enough. No, the committee did not include the right people. No, they can send it back to start over. So there is checks and balances along this. So we did try to build in a little flexibility in the policy because, you know, we're setting policy now, but we're actually going to have to implement and deal with it down the road. And while, you know, putting the restrictive language like shall here seems like a good idea, sometimes when we're actually implementing it, it creates a bit of a challenge. There is that check and balance through the committee and ultimately the board that if any step of the process was questioned or it's deemed to be inadequate, reject, send it back, start again. That's always an opportunity as well.
Thank you. Do you have a comment with how you want to move forward on this, Trustee Dale?
I'd like to,
Put your mic on, please. Thank you.
I would really, if we're gonna try to do it right, start off with given the open-ended to say they're offered the opportunity,
Shall be offered?
shall be offered the opportunity, yeah, instead of may, because it doesn't say.
Does that work?
Okay, 2 or 3.
Okay, so we're going to have a 6.11 shall be offered. And do we have a seconder? Okay, I have Trustee Clark as a seconder to that. Okay. Any other points in this policy that we would like to go through? Well, I guess I will ask, one question. So, I really appreciate the change. I think we've, the feedback from the last meeting in January was well done and well implemented. And my only comment was when we're in the 5.2? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, 5.2D and then 5.3. So, people will put in writing and request a name change. What, I think I asked the question previously, what is the criteria? Like, what if I get 500 different individuals want to change the name of one school? How do we prevent, your department from being overwhelmed with all these requests that we've just said 6 months? Or potentially, if we have an amendment, 6 months change on. Do you have any thoughts for that, Superintendent?
Thanks, Chair, for the question. We want this process to be both engaging and accessible and grounded, which is why it's written in the policy that stakeholders within the PSB community can have access to making a request. The strength of our relationship is between students and staff with their principal. Principals will have awareness of this policy and be able to, have those, close conversations with, those who are submitting to say, this looks promising, it falls within the category, or maybe not. And when it does, we continue to lift it up to a conversation between the principal and the superintendent of education. So as was alluded to earlier, we are really trying to build in not only opportunities for engagement and participation, but to check and make sure that those names, those submissions that do actually really tightly attend to the criteria are being lifted up to directors' attention so that we can really engage in a meaningful way the naming committee, whether at the school level for a special program area with the superintendent of education supervising, or a school name change and a program area, school name change and facility supervised by the associate director with support of the superintendent of education.
Thank you, Superintendent Ford. Okay, so do we have any more comments? Questions, any potential changes? Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go down through each of the amendments. I have 3 to go through that we've already been put on the floor and seconded. So we'll go through it. We'll allow you to debate. One we'll give you an opportunity to talk once if you want to talk to it, and then we'll vote. And so we're going to start with the first one, which is 5.4. We're going to add the wording to it to not to exceed 6 months. So does anyone want to make a comment or suggestion, or we go straight to a vote? Okay, so since it's on the floor, all those in favor? I have a majority, so that is passed. Okay, we're going to move on to the second one, 5.9. And 5.9, we are clarifying the individual names of individuals. So I'm going to ask the governance council to just specifically talk about what the change will be, so we're all very clear on what we're voting.
Thank you for the opportunity, and through you, Mr. Chair, the paragraph 5.9 would be amended to reflect 5.9A, names of individuals, and then include the categories of current employees and board members, and C and D as subcategories of the needs of individuals. So there's clarity that is names of individuals that is being prohibited.
Wonderful. I'm clear on that. So anyone else have any comments or questions? We go to the vote since it's already on the floor. All those in favor? And it's passed. Okay. And we'll go down to the last one, 6.11. We are now going to change the members of the naming committee. It may include, will be changed to shall be offered to. Okay. Do we have any questions around that? No? Okay. All those in favor of this motion? It's passed. So the last motion is to accept or pass the amended policy as we've just completed. So I'll need someone to put that on the floor. Trustee Al, someone second that. Trustee Bailey, do anyone have any comments before we go to a vote? Okay, those all in favor of the amended policy, policy number, what we got? Policy number. Ooh, what policy number is this? Policy.
We're not numbering them.
Oh, we're not. Okay. All those in favor of the naming and renaming schools, special functions, areas, and facility policy. The motion passes. Thank you. That's a lot of work. Good. Okay, so we're now going to move on to 7.3, student registration and admission policy. So who's going to be presenting that? Our governance council?
Thank you for the opportunity. And through you, Mr. Chair, I'm going to introduce Elizabeth England, our consulting principal, curriculum, instructional, and community supports, who will walk us through the student registration and admission policy. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Curriculum, Instruction, and Assessment Department is seeking recommendation for approval for student registration and admission policy. The purpose of this new policy, herein named this policy, it is the student registration and admission policy, is to facilitate the registration, admission, placement, and withdrawal of eligible students to the Peelschools School Board in accordance with the requirements of the Education Act and its associated policy and program memoranda and guidance documents. The application of this policy applies to all students and/or parents or guardians applying and are accepted for enrollment and admission to Peel District School Board, and to all Peel District School Board staff involved in the processing of applications, of registrations, and admissions of students. The policy will, at all times, be interpreted in a manner consistent with board policies, the Education Act and its regulations, relevant ministry policy and program memoranda and guidance documents, the Ontario Human Rights Code, and other applicable legislation. This policy is aligned with and supports the principles and expectations of PDSB Policy 51, Human Rights, Policy 54, Equity and Inclusive Education, and the Anti-Racism Policy. Here's just a brief overview of a few of the key components. It recognizes the responsibility of the board to ensure anti-oppressive registration practices and to align with ministry memoranda. We will be operationalizing the policy through procedures to help schools become aware of legal requirements and parameters for school admission. And please note that one of the drafts is of the operating procedure was attached to the guidelines for tonight. Student registration and admission is also attached. The policy will guide registration processes of students new to Canada, and it will also serve as a parent, or I like to think of it as an umbrella policy, to the student registration and admission requirement procedure, the revised grade placement procedures for elementary and secondary school students, for adult and continuing education registration requirements, and for non-resident pupil requirements and families who are new to Peel and to Canada. So it's a big umbrella policy for lots that will come in terms of operating procedure. Do you have any questions? I'd be happy to have.
Thank you. Do I have any comments? Yeah, Trustee Bailey.
I have one question, but it's really not policy related, it's just the package.
Okay.
In 4.31, what was it supposed to say at the beginning?
I've got policy A, B, C, I've got letters here. Where am I looking?
And I printed it out, it says page 9 of 17 on 4.31. Under, it's this.
4.1, the policy?
Yes. It is a policy.
We're talking 4.3?
No, it says 4.3.
31. No, I don't have 30.
I've got the letters here, so I've got policy A, but I see Superintendent Day has 4.1. So I've got
right.
for A, B, C, D, E, F, G.
Oh, it's down the second one. Oh, it's the second.
Yeah, but 431 starts with a comment.
Get this one last time, what it's supposed to say.
Yeah.
I got it.
Thanks, man.
I've got alpha here.
Yes, please, the
Could you read it to
our
me?
governance
And then
council.
we'll-
Thank you for the observation. I'm very, through you, Mr. Chair, very impressed with that detail, but appreciate that.
We're supposed to read that.
I do appreciate it. Thank you. I do note with the reference that you've made. It is in the procedure, which was attached for some reference. Those procedures are going to the Directors' Council to be approved, and we'll correct that comma. I believe it's supposed to say note in the front of it, as opposed to, it's another classification, much like 4.29 and 4.30. So it's to set the stage a little bit for the procedure for registration.
Thank you for explaining.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
So-
I was looking at the policy through you, Mr.
Yeah,
Chair.
we were all
rather
looking at
than
the policy.
Rather than
It's
the operating procedure. Sorry.
Yes.
Oh.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification, Trustee Bailey and everyone here and our governance council. Good. Any other questions or comments, Trustee Alves?
Thank you, Chairman, through you. A little bit of a comment and a question. So subsection 4.49, students without legal immigration status, did this subsection A, B, C, and D, did this exist in our, as a policy for us before this?
It existed in operating procedure, but not in policy. So this policy is new.
Yeah, Manager? Thank you. And again, through your chair, my comment then would be, I think this is wonderful and thank you for bringing this to us. I come from a family of immigrants and my dad definitely had a hard time coming into Canada many a year ago. And I think that, families that are coming in and dealing with whatever they're dealing with, a lot of them have young kids and we deserve top-notch education. So well done and thank you for bringing this. And I'm glad to see this being pushed into a policy.
Thank you. I will extend my thanks to those who were responsible for writing.
Trustee McDonald, I believe.
Trustee McDonald, online, do you have a question, comment?
Maybe she was waiting.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Chair. And thank you for that report, Elizabeth. My question though is with regards to how would this, like the information here, be delivered to the appropriate staff, including like the We Welcome the Word Center in terms of student registration to the PDSB, and in particular, I'm concerned about, and I printed off, where is it? You referenced the Ministry of Directive, PPM 3, where is the report? Sorry, we have so many papers juggling. 3, I think it was 3, just 1 second, I lost the actual number. Oh, PPM, yeah, 136, sorry. Clarification on section 49.1 to the Education Act, education of persons unlawful in Canada. So my concern is that as recently as last week, I met 3 individuals, right, who were Jamaican immigrants trying to get into a high school in Mississauga, actually. And they were told by the We Welcome the World Center that they needed their transcript, even though they had all their documents. And they're out of school for like 3 months before they wouldn't be admitted to the school. And I can't understand, especially reading the policy, this goes against it. And even when I look at that same PPM 136, you know, even in the absence of, and there are different sections like students in Canada unlawfully or students who don't have their documentation. And there's another category in this PPM. So I'm wondering, how is this information being relayed to folks, example, in the We Welcome the World, so that kids are not out of school for, and months at a time trying to get in.
Thank you, Trustee McDonald. Through you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I'm going to, just for everybody's reference, read the section of Policy Memorandum 136 from 2018. A person who is otherwise entitled to be admitted to a school and who is less than 18 years of age shall not be refused admission because the person or person's parent or guardian is unlawfully in Canada. That's a very important section. It has been communicated and worked on with the We Welcome the World Center, so I'm very disheartened to hear that, Trustee McDonald, because there has been training that has happened through coordinating principal Lucy Fields, and also through coordinating principal Lori Letourneau under Superintendent Day, who's with me this evening. And this training has happened both at the We Welcome the World Centers and has been offered as training to all schools with recent changes to the We Welcome the World policy. So I'm disheartened to hear that this happened, and would certainly want to know what has happened with those students next, because my understanding is that that is not to happen.
Yeah, thank you for that, because I was really concerned about that. And even in Brampton, in the North schools, there's another case where people had migrated again from Jamaica, but the only reason they knew they got in because the aunt is a friend of mine, so she knew what a trustee was. A lot of new immigrants don't know what a trustee is. So when they go to the We Welcome this World Center and get a no, they just sit and wait, right? So this person knew as a trustee, and she reached out to me and her nephew. They had a flood, and she got a police report saying, here, there's a flood, the passport got wet, all their documentation. The police gave them the report, and they said they had evidence that they had written to Jamaica to get the documents again and their passport, everything, and they wouldn't let them into the school until I got involved. This time it wasn't as long because the person knew to reach out to a trustee for help. But again, that young kid, and he was about 11, I think, 10 or 11, was seeing his cousins go to school, and he was just sitting at home for 2 weeks, right? So I think there is some disconnect to the getting the information from the policy to the staff. So that's just my concern.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, I understand that the students do still need identification to enter the school. So there is in the operational policy, if you look through the policy, in the registration procedure, and students new to Canada, they would go to the We Welcome the World Center, but there we go, proof of birth date, age requirements, eligibility requirements, etc. That they would still need to provide proof of the birth date through one of the following acceptable documents. So in hearing your story about the documents that were lost in the flood, etc., it might have been on the bottom of page 4 in the operational procedure. It may have been that they had no proof of identification. That might have been the difficulty. I don't have all of the details, but that might have not been the case that they were from another country that was the difficulty, but rather that they had no proof of identity.
No, they
Possibly.
had,
But-
sorry, Elizabeth, they had the documentation, but it was just wet. So it was destroyed and they were getting, and they had proof that they had applied to get a proper copy. So it was destroyed, it was flooded, right?
Okay, I just know that if you look at through you, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
That 4.5.1, proof of birth date, it doesn't go over damage to documents, but it does list the documents there that are needed to enter school. But I'm glad, Trustee McDonald, that you did become involved in advocating on behalf of the students.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Trustee Bailey, do you have another comment?
Question
Okay, question.
for you, Chair. Does this policy cover Peel Virtual School? And if so, how you collected the information for them to be in Ontario?
That was my question.
Oh, sorry.
No, this is good.
That is an excellent question to you, Mr. Chair. I know that Superintendent Bernadette Smith in Research and Innovation is currently looking into the different ways of educating students who are in different jurisdictions. Currently, we do not have a way of proving whether a child in virtual school is in the country or is not in the country.
Okay. No, you want, yes.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, that's a great, it is a great question. And just to build on what Boarding Principal said, we are working on a procedure that will fall under this policy. So there isn't a necessity for an additional policy. I just noticed the conversation here about asking for an additional policy. This policy is broad enough that we cover that, because we talk about jurisdictions, et cetera. But there is work underway currently with a procedure to fall under this policy.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Is that good? A good answer?
It does, but it doesn't really cover virtual at all.
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, the procedure is specifically for virtual school, specifically for that.
They're working. Good. Any other? Okay, so can I have someone, I haven't put it on the floor yet, right? No, so can I put it on the floor? Trustee Al, someone to second, Trustee Benjamin. All those in favor? Motion passes. Okay. That is done. We're now on to 7.4, AI and plagiarism. So I'm going to pass this over to our governance council, and I assume that you can pass it on to someone else. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, through you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to turn it over to our policy analyst, LaShawn Murray, who will respond to the motion for information about artificial intelligence for plagiarism. I'll turn it over to LaShawn. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Through you, Chair, as per the committee's request, tonight I'm providing an overview on the recognition or status of artificial intelligence systems and any PDSB policy regarding plagiarism. Artificial intelligence refers to computer systems that can imitate or execute tasks commonly requiring human intelligence, including but not limited to reasoning, problem solving, making predictions, and producing creative work. ChatGPT is an example of generative AI, tools that leverage machine learning trained on large data sets to generate new content, including text, such as essays, poems, lessons, images, music, and audio. The recent launch of ChatGPT has sparked conversations on the implications of artificially generated content, on the definition of plagiarism and academic dishonesty in both K-12 and post-secondary institutions. Currently, the Peel District School Board does not have a policy that exclusively addresses plagiarism. However, plagiarism is referenced within Policy 14, Student Assessment, Evaluation, and Reporting in Peel Elementary and Secondary Schools. Policy 14 outlines the responsibilities of educators and school teams to communicate expectations for original student content and provides guidance when responding to students who have plagiarized or cheated. As per the Ministry of Education's definition, plagiarism is defined as the use or close imitation of the language and thoughts of another without attribution in order to represent them as one's original work. Additionally, plagiarism is also referenced within the Student Code of Conduct, which is cross-listed in Policy 78, the Digital Citizenship Policy. Through the Student Code of Conduct, students commit to practice honesty and integrity, including but not limited to not participating in or encouraging plagiarism, misrepresentation of original work, lying, cheating, theft of evaluation instruments, use of unauthorized aids, or false representation of identity. The use of artificially generated content without attribution or the representation of this content as original work would constitute plagiarism or academic dishonesty under the Student Assessment, Evaluation, and Reporting Policy, as well as the Student Code of Conduct. However, the absence of an explicit reference to AI and plagiarism is a noticeable gap within our existing policies, and it can inform the upcoming reviews of both digital citizenship and student assessment and evaluation, and it also creates an opportunity for the development of a new policy on plagiarism. Both digital citizenship and student assessment, evaluation, and reporting are scheduled for review in the coming months. And in the interim, our team in legal and governance will continue to monitor the external environment as it relates to AI in education and on PDSE policies.
Great, that's excellent. I'm glad that everyone's talking about it from January. I can't believe how many people are talking about this. So thank you for doing that. And bringing the context into where it fits into the various points of our touch points. You've talked about it, the various policies and the potential of the new one. So I'm going to, first of all, I'm going to put this on the floor so we can have a discussion. So Trustee Al, since you're the one that brought this up, you're going to put it on the floor, and seconded by Trustee Bailey. So I'm going to open it up for discussion. Trustee Els.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to thank staff for bringing this report, and it's fulsome in nature. I would say to start, I think my personal thoughts on this are different as they relate to staff and in the classroom. I almost wish that they had were separate, because I do think they're two very different policies. In response to this report in front of me, I think that I would like to explore a motion for a policy consideration for staff as it relates to AI chatbots and their prohibition when it comes to generating external content. The use of chatbots in external content production poses a risk to the reputation of organizations, as it can lead to the dissemination or incorrect or inappropriate publication of information. And additionally, in recent times specifically, the Office of the Privacy Commissioner of Canada launched an investigation into one of the, for lack of a better word, one of the manufacturers of software like this. It's OpenAI, because of concerns of privacy and one's data and the risk it poses to an institution. So, but that is very different, in my personal opinion, than to the conversation around plagiarism, AI, and classrooms. And I think that maybe that's a conversation for the curriculum committee. So after reviewing this policy, I think where I want to start, Chairman, is if I could please ask for a motion to perhaps maybe it's appropriate to ask for a notice of motion so we have time to draft it, but no? I'll just ask. You would like to put a motion is what I'm hearing, but you haven't formulated it. Yeah.
You're like trying to formulate a motion.
To introduce the staff plagiarism policy and as it relates to artificial intelligence and using artificial intelligence to produce external content.
I'll pass it over to our governance council.
Thank you, and through you, Mr. Chair, just to clarify, is your motion that you would like a report back with a draft policy to prohibit staff from using artificial intelligence in
Staff.
May I clarify?
Yeah, please.
Thank you, Chairman. So my clarification has to be really specific because of the definition of AI. So specifically, use of AI power, specifically the prohibition of AI chatbots, not the prohibition of AI-powered design platforms. So we're not blanket policing AI, only the chatbots. So an example would be ChatGPT, but other examples may be Quillbot, or there's a slew of them. I don't have any more top of mind, but chatbots is a blanket term for this specific type of artificial intelligence. But again, we're not regulating. I'm not suggesting that we regulate AI-powered design platforms, only chatbots.
Okay. So before we you would like to have a motion, but you don't know how to write and stuff. Why would it not just be best to just work with maybe our policy people and then or our governance council, and just come up with a motion that we do a notice of motion and bring that forward at our next meeting?
That's perfect. Yeah, notice of motion is
yes, that would be the best. Because that gives you the time to formulate what you want, because it's a very confusing subject. I'm not understanding, because there's various things. Like I just used it yesterday. I took 4 sentences and reduced it to 2.
Yeah.
Right? Because boom, that's what I needed to do, and it did a great job. But I
just need Strunk and White for that.
Sorry?
I just need Strunk and White for that.
Yeah. But at the same time, there's other uses that people are using, like, am I talking to someone on the other side? Right? You know, and all this kind of stuff. So it's a very interesting conversation, and people are exploring it like we are. So why don't we just put some time to create something, and then we can go forward with that. Yeah. Yes.
Thank you, Chairman, and again through you, sir. And my overarching theme here is, while I appreciate the how fulsome this report really was, I just do want to reiterate, especially personally, that I do think the conversation between AI chatbots and their use professionally and in the classroom totally different. I think they are wonderful potential learning aids for classrooms, and I think they offer students just wonderful opportunities to develop new skills and so on and so forth. So I think that down the line, that would be a conversation for a different committee. But while I appreciate the fulsomeness of the report, I think this one is very specific to staff.
Okay.
Can I just ask something?
Yes, Trustee Benjamin, yes.
Through the chair, I'm not much of a technology person, and I've reached that age where I don't use much of this. So my question is, when you talk about artificial intelligence and all, what grade levels are we talking about? Is it from kindergarten up? You're going to use it for testing, and you said you don't use it for testing and so on and so forth. So do we specify even grade levels of how it should be used? What are the controls or something that should be in place, et cetera, et cetera?
I can send it back to our policy analysis, but basically she identified that we need to go through, it's in the actions, the next steps, actions required. She said we need to review and revise the digital citizenship policy. You know, we need to go through and continue looking at other policies and maybe create a new policy. So this is a brave new world of figuring out how this one little thing is going to affect it. It's not like it can be used just one way. It can use much more than we. And Trustee Al's approach is saying, okay, that's students we're first concerned, but now there's staff uses it, which is it's good too. But then again, it also can be used inappropriately, or the thought of being used inappropriately. So these are all the things that everyone is trying to grapple with. Yet, as I said earlier, and I don't mean to comment to this, but you know, I brought it up 3 months ago, and with my kids, and one's in university, and now like everyone's using it.
Yeah, and that keeps on changing.
Yeah.
Literally overnight, and so how are we going to keep pace with it?
I know. So we have to get on this. We have to get in front of this, but at least that we start the process with this report. We're going to possibly have another motion come forward, and I assume we'll see policies probably coming out as curriculum, and other people start figuring out, and other boards. We're all in the same boat. But anyway, sorry to add so much comment to this, but I appreciate the conversation around this because it is an important one that we as a board need to address. Any other comments? I don't, no, Trustee House, you want to make?
So my only additional is, I believe I asked this in the other, I'm not sure if it was in the report, I may have missed it, but one question that I asked originally was, do we own at the PDSB level software to detect AI? I understand that we do own some software as it relates to Turnitin, and I do understand that Turnitin now has a new package for the specifically tailored to ChatGPT. Have we purchased it?
Through you, Chair, I'd have to take that question back to LTSS and the software asset management team.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think that's great.
Yeah. Okay, Trustee Bailey, you wanted to raise your hand about something?
No, it's okay.
Okay, we're okay. Okay, it's on the floor. Great. So all those in favor of receipt of this great report? Okay, it passes. Okay, unanimous. Okay, now we're done with 4, and we're now going into 7.5. Identity-based data collection policy. So I'm going to pass it over to our governance council, who's going to introduce, I assume, our policy analysis to present it. Okay.
Thank you very much, and through you, Mr. Chair, I'm going to turn it over to our policy analyst, LaShawn Murray, who's going to walk us through the draft and hoping for some raising of awareness of this committee and any feedback that this committee would have on the policy. It is still a draft at this stage, and this isn't the opportunity necessarily to recommend it for approval. This is an opportunity to provide comments on this type of policy. So I will turn it over to LaShawn at this time. Thank you.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. The collection of identity-based data is valuable to help the board understand the diversity within the Peel community, to identify gaps and barriers in programming initiatives and processes that are evidence of systemic racism and discrimination, to inform action plans, initiatives, and actions to address those gaps and barriers, and to assess and address ongoing disproportionalities and inequities. Currently, the board collects identity-based data pertaining to Indigenous identity, ethnicity, race, gender identity, sexual orientation, religion, and disability. To support the ongoing collection and use of identity-based data of students, staff, both current and prospective, and trustees, the PDSB has drafted the identity-based data collection policy. The purpose of this policy is to permit the collection of student, staff, and trustee identity-based data through various intentional methods that are guided by the Anti-Racism Act and related legislation, to establish the guiding principles governing the collection and use of identity-based data, and to inform the ongoing monitoring of board initiatives and system changes, and inform practices, policies, and programs to advance equity and accountability at the PDSB. This policy will apply to all circumstances when the PDSB collects and uses the identity-based data of students, staff, prospective staff, and trustees. This current draft builds upon the work of past policy consultations, such as the anti-racism policy, and is informed by consultations with Peel staff, students, families, and community, including the Indigenous Education Council. Tonight, we would like to receive feedback from the committee on this draft policy. The draft policy is also undergoing consultations with our central superintendent departments, LTSS, the unions and associations, the field superintendents, and the advisory committees. We also have an online survey on the new policy consultations page on the external site, where we are receiving feedback from the broader PDSB community.
Great, thank you for that. Does anyone have any feedback for this this initial pass of the policy? Trustee Clark?
Just a comment. Thank you for the hard work. This is great. I look forward to seeing where this goes. And honestly, when I first decided to run, I thought I was going to have to do all this stuff. But I'm just so happy that it's already in action. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions? So I should put this on the floor. Who wants to put this on the floor for receipt? So trustee Clark, seconded by trustee Bailey. All those in favor of receipt? Okay, pass. Good. Let's move on to item. Oh, did you have a comment, question? Okay. Oops, I just closed it. Let me see. 7.6. So 7.6, policy management program update. So I'm going to pass this over to our governance council and move on.
Thank you very much, and through you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to be turning this over to policy analyst LaShawn Murray. As you can tell, she's been very busy, very busy. And we thought it was important to provide an update, as this is the committee that is responsible for sending policies onto the board, et cetera, to keep you informed of the actual policy management program and how it's being implemented. There was not a policy management formal program before we got here. And so this is our opportunity, and it's important that we provide you with updates. And with that, I'll turn it over to LaShawn.
Thank you, and through you, Chair. As evidence of good governance, our department is currently developing and implementing the new policy management program. This program seeks to develop and implement a framework for a systematic approach to the development, review, approval, and repeal of policies. It aims to establish naming and numbering conventions for all policies and procedures that reflect their purpose and function, to identify and address gaps in both policies and procedures, to ensure that all procedures are updated and ladder up to a parent policy, and to ensure that all policies and procedures are reviewed on a predetermined review schedule. This report provides an update on the program. Earlier this month, Directors Council approved 3 procedures that operationalize policy development and review framework. The first procedure is on policy and procedure management, and it outlines the new identification system, the naming and numbering conventions, and the formatting requirements for all policies, procedures, and related forms. Historically, within the board, policies have been developed on an ad hoc basis and were numbered consecutively without an identified connection to the purpose of the policy. Additionally, procedures have not consistently laddered up to a policy and were numbered with a connection to the organizational department at the time, but not necessarily to the procedure's function. And so at this time, we have procedures that are numbered in reference to older departments. This new procedure assigns all policies and subsequently their procedures and forms to a specified functional category. Accordingly, policies will receive an identification number that relates to their functional category and an approval date. Procedures and forms will receive an identification that indicates a clear connection to their parent policy. We are currently working with both LTSS and the Communications Department on the redesign of the policies page, both on the intranet and the external site, and the reclassification will come into effect once these pages have been developed. Additionally, Directors Council approved the policy development and review procedure alongside the procedure development and review procedure. And so for the policy development and review procedure, it outlines the stages of the process from the identification of a policy need to how the policy gets in front of this committee, to trustee approval, communications, and implementation. The procedure development and review procedure outlines the stages of the process from the identification of the need for a procedure to Directors Council approval and then the communications plan and implementation. Both these procedures describe the process for notifying Directors Council and Legal and Governance. They direct the formation of a committee that's led by the responsible office. They reinforce the need for community consultations and engagement where applicable, and for all policies and procedures to be informed by an environmental scan. And they build in accountability through the appendices. We've included a work plan, a sign-off process during the review stage, and the direction to have both an implementation and communications plan for each policy or procedure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sean. It's much appreciated. Do I have any, again, first, who wants to put this on the floor? Trustee Bailey, seconded by Trustee Benjamin. Any comments or questions? Yes, Trustee Bailey.
This is, through you, Chair, This is a lot of work to organize the also, so kudos and well done in doing it. My question though is, I've noticed the review schedules. How do you determine how the time period of the reviews?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. Within the policy development and review framework, policy reviews need to occur within 5 years. And then based on the regulatory environment, some policies have an earlier review schedule than others, but we sort of keep track of that as we go along.
And is there a system that tells you what's coming up for review, or is it you just have to keep track of it in your head?
Thank you, and through you, Chair. We are working on a master schedule so that all responsible offices will be informed in advance of when their policies are up for review.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions? I'll ask one. Are we talking to other boards to see what their policy, what they do for this? I assume they've done these kind of things before that we can, leverage from their learning.
Through you, Chair, we did do an environmental scan for all components of the program so far. And so, for example, a lot of the accountability mechanisms were informed by TDSB's policy development and review process. And on the side, we as policy analysts do have a Slack channel in which we keep each other up to date.
Nice. Thank you so much. So all those in favor of receipt of this report? This will pass. So we'll move on to now, I think we're on 7.7, records retention. So I'll pass it over to our governance council, and we'll pass it off to you.
Thank you very much. Through you, Mr. Chair. The next report is the records retention schedule, and I'm going to be passing it on to Oriana Sharp, our privacy officer, as she will explain how the records retention schedule is important and fits into the overall records management program. And I believe Oriana's online.
Oriana's online, yes.
Yep. The best for last.
Yep, we can hear you.
The Education Act states that a board shall institute a program of records management that will establish schedules for the retention, disposition, and eventual destruction of records of the board and of the schools under its jurisdiction. Until now, there has been no formal schedule. Records management refers to the creation, maintenance, use, and disposal of records of an organization throughout their entire life cycle. Records management ensures the protection of records vital to the administration and governance of the board, the protection of valuable records, common expectation of available and accessible information, a framework for effective, efficient, and economical information practices. The Privacy and Information Management Committee of the Ontario Association of School Board Officials, OWASBO, developed a generic records retention schedule that can be applied to the core functions of any school board. The records retention schedule attached is based largely on the precedent created by OWASBO. It is consistent with other school boards as well. The purpose of the schedule is to guide staff in making appropriate decisions for records to ensure that they are kept as long as legally and operationally required, and that obsolete records are disposed of in a systematic and controlled manner. Records are categorized by their content, regardless of their format: paper, video, or electronic. Records are further organized by business function. The records retention schedule specifies the following business sections: administration, public engagement and communications, facilities and environmental support management, financial management, legal and governance, human resources, partnerships and equity management, planning and accommodation, curriculum, instruction, and assessment, safe and caring schools. Additional functions, if needed, will be added in consultation with the business sections. All board employees shall comply with the retention periods as specified in Appendix A. Ensure that official records in their custody or control are protected from inadvertent destruction or damage, and ensure that transitory records in their custody or control are destroyed when they are no longer needed. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm going to ask Trustee McDonald to put it on the floor, Kathy McDonald. And do I have a seconder? Okay, Trustee Benjamin, do we have any questions or comments for this important report that we received? Seeing none, all those in favor of this report? So be passed. So we have completed that. So we're now on to our last bit of the agenda. There is no items under communications. Trustee motions for consideration. So I'm going to just let trustees be aware of the bylaws that if you're going to put an item to the committee, you have to supply, and I stand corrected before I even say it, 48 hours in written to the governance council to be put as a notice of motion to be considered on an agenda. And so I'll say yes, I said I'm going to stand and correct it, so please.
Sorry, it's 48 hours before the distribution of the agenda, and the distribution of the agenda is 5 days before the meeting. So if your meeting is on a Wednesday, yes, so 6 7.
7 days, just so let everyone know, and that includes holidays? Okay.
7 straight days.
7 straight days. So I just want to let people know about that because we've had some discussions around it, and I think it's part of our learning process. I think that's a learning moment from our meeting today.
Through you, Chair, sorry.
Yes, yes.
You just said trustees notice of motions or trustees motions for consideration?
Yeah, sorry, again, I stand corrected.
Thank you for the question through you, Mr. Chair. It is for notices of motions. So item number 9 on this agenda is trustees' motions for considerations. So had there been a notice at the last meeting, then that motion would have been dealt with at this meeting. There were no notices at last meeting, so there are no motions for consideration under this agenda. Item number 10 on this agenda is trustee notices of motion. So had I received something 7 days ago, we would have included that notice at number 10 to be heard at the main meeting.
Great. Thank you for the clarification. And yes, Trustee Ailes.
Great, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I suppose then I have a notice of motion.
Well, I was going to wait. So before you're there, we're going to get to 10, and I was going to. So since we've done 10, 9, now we're going to go on to 10. We have no notices of motions, but I have given lenience to Trustee Ailes to mention.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll start by thanking you for the leniency here. 10 days ago, we didn't know that this is something I would have liked to bring, but speaking with some constituents, that especially some that may be listening in tonight, this is a notice of motion for a policy that would regulate assemblies, and the notice given and a policy that would regulate and notice given to parents ahead of them to help. Parents wade through some confusion that might have happened in recent times. So again, thank you very much, Chairman, for the leniency and for the accommodation. Very grateful.
Yeah, no problem. So we're going to move on to adjournment. So I need someone to put that on the floor. Trustee Ailes and Trustee Bailey, all those in favor of adjournment? So good. Thank you.